Ja, willkommen zur zweiten Vorlesung, Gegenwartsarchitektur. Wir haben heute Gäste aus Zürich, ich werde sie gleich vorstellen. Ich will gerne am Anfang nur 10 Minuten oder so eine kleine Einleitung machen und auch eine Überleitung und die Vorlesung vom letzten Mal nochmal aufgreifen. Also wir werden eine kleine Einleitung haben, jetzt 10 Minuten, dann gibt es je eine halbe Stunde Präsentation von unseren beiden Gästen und am Schluss werden wir noch eine kurze Diskussionsrunde haben. Wir haben immer die gleichen Fragen, 4 Fragen, die wir alle unsere Gäste in diesem Semester stellen wollen. Dazu komme ich gleich. Was letztes Mal ein bisschen zu kurz gekommen ist, ist vielleicht, also es kamen viele Rückfragen diesbezüglich, wie wir denn Theorie verstehen. Das ist die Gegenwartsarchitektur-Vorlesung, organisiert von der Abteilung für Architekturtheorie und Technikphilosophie. Was uns wichtig ist, und das ist auch ein bisschen eine Einleitung zu dieser Prüfungsform, die wir gewählt haben. Wir verstehen Architekturtheorie nicht auf das Vermitteln von Architektur zu einer Öffentlichkeit. Ja, das ist heute oftmals so verstanden. Ich bin nicht der Meinung, dass das sinnvoll ist, Architektur so zu verstehen. Wir verstehen Architekturtheorie auch nicht als Architekturkritik. Architekturkritik kann man vielleicht am ehesten als eine Kunstform von journalistischem Schreiben verstehen. Was ich in den Vorlesungen für Sie aber entwickeln möchte, ist, dass es ohne Theorie gar keine Architektur gibt. Das ist jetzt nicht irgendwie eine Behauptung, die in der Zeit liegt oder die besonders ungehörig wäre oder so, das ist eigentlich der Kern. Bei Vitruf, Sie werden das hören, wenn Sie durch die Kunstgeschichte, Architekturgeschichte und Architekturtheorievorlesungen gehen. Was es besagt, ist ganz einfach, dass man in der Architektur immer theoretisch denkt. In der Konsequenz heißt das, wenn Sie sagen, die Beschäftigung mit Theorie ist nicht so ganz mein Ding, interessiert mich nicht so sehr, dann können Sie trotzdem gut bauen. Das ist vollkommen außer Frage. Aber Sie werden in einem Zeitgeist bauen, Sie werden sich in bestimmten, eigentlich arbiträren Gewohnheiten einrichten und Sie werden bestimmte Schemen weitertreiben. Das heißt nicht, dass Schemen schlecht sind, überhaupt nicht, die sind super wichtig. Aber was man aus der Architekturtheorie lernen kann, ist, wie sich solche Schemen entwickeln und wie sich die auch verändern. Und diesbezüglich möchte sowohl die Gegenwartsarchitekturvorlesung als auch dann die Architekturtheorievorlesungen Ihnen ein bisschen eine Einführung geben. Das ist auch der Punkt, wo sich die Architekturtheorie mit der Philosophie sehr stark überschneidet und sehr viel mit Mathematik zu tun hat. Diese Abgrenzung, also Architekturtheorie, kann nicht reduziert werden auf journalistisches Schreiben, auf Kommunikation, heißt nicht, dass diese beiden Dinge nicht essentiell wichtig sind für Architekturtheorie. Wir haben die Form unserer Prüfung, also die schriftliche Prüfung, als das Verfassen von so einem Kurztext über ein architektonisches Objekt, der Tisch in diesem Semester, gewählt, weil wir Ihnen ein bisschen vermitteln möchten, wie man im architekturtheoretischen Denken sehr wohl gut schreiben kann und trotzdem einen theoretischen Anspruch hat. Das heißt konkret, wir möchten gerne, dass Sie solche Texte schreiben. Es wird einen Termin geben, also das heißt, da kam jetzt oft die Frage, können wir einfach jetzt einen Text schreiben, den einreichen und dann haben wir bestanden? So ist das natürlich nicht gedacht, sondern im Januar, wir müssen den Termin und auch die Modalität, also wo genau Sie es hochladen können oder ob wir wirklich einen physischen Termin machen müssen, das müssen wir noch herausfinden. Aber Ende der Vorlesung, Ende vom Semester im Januar, erwarten wir von all Ihnen einen Text zum Tisch. Wir haben Ihnen Beispiele letztes Mal vorgestellt, die sind auf dem Tisch, inzwischen auch als PDF, Sie können sich das als gesamtes Buch herunterladen. Und was wir bewerten werden ist, also wenn Sie einen grammatikalisch korrekten Text schreiben, ein Tisch hat 4 Beine, er hat eine Platte, er ist ewig alt, was weiß ich. Also wenn Sie einen Tisch beschreiben, dann haben Sie bestanden. Ja? Bestanden heißt 4. Ja? Wenn es grammatikalisch korrekt ist, in guter Form ist, dann müssen Sie nichts befürchten, Sie haben bestanden. Was wir aber möchten, ist Ihnen das als Übung mitgeben durch die ganze Vorlesungsreihe hindurch, um sich zu überlegen, wie kann ich eine interessante Haltung wählen, um den Tisch zu artikulieren. Warum so etwas Unscheinbares oder so etwas Langweiliges wie Quantität irgendwie eröffnend sein könnte oder irgendwie interessant werden könnte. Der Hintergrund, warum wir das wählen, hat ganz einfach damit zu tun, dass, wissen, diese Aversion und diese Abneigung, die wir gegenüber dem Quantitativen haben. Ja, wir hören immer, es gibt Informationsschwämme, es gibt von allem Möglichen, das haben wir letztes Mal gehört, es gibt so viel von allem, alles wird arbiträr, nichts ist mehr verbindlich, wir brauchen wieder Qualitäten, das hören wir die ganze Zeit. Was wir aber aus der Geschichte schauen können, ist, dass man über das Denken von Quantitäten eine neue Weise finden kann, Qualitäten wieder wertvoll zu machen. Und das ist das eigentliche Interesse mit dem Thema. Auf einer sehr allgemeinen Ebene, wenn Sie sich fragen, warum die Architektur und die Architekturtheorie in der Renaissance so wichtig oder sich so stark entwickelt hat, sagen wir mal, dann hat das auf einer technischen und philosophischen Ebene sehr viel damit zu tun, dass man neue Messinstrumente gehabt hat. Man hat neue Messinstrumente gehabt, weil man auf neue Weisen gezählt hat, weil man auf neue Weisen Geometrie gemacht hat. Es gab keine Koordinatensystem, keine Zentralperspektive vorher. Das heißt, man hat auf andere Weisen Quantitäten gemessen. Und das hat sich so geäußert, unter anderem natürlich, dass man ein großes Interesse wieder entwickelt hat an den Dingen, die buchstäblich während Jahrhunderten einfach als uninteressant übrig geblieben waren. An den Monumenten aus der Antike. In Rom liegen diese ganzen Schätze herum und heute ist es sehr komisch, sich vorzustellen, dass während vielen 100 Jahren, die da einfach gelegen sind und niemand hat das interessant gefunden. Ja, das ist komisch, die Vorstellung. Und auch, dass dann plötzlich einzelne Leute, die sind dann aus Florenz, dort hat eigentlich die Musik gespielt, in der Renaissance zuerst zumindest, haben die angefangen nach Rom zu pilgern und sich auf diese Steine gesetzt und gemessen. Also das heißt, sie haben versucht, eine Vorstellung zu entwickeln, wie diese Architektur, von denen nur noch die Spuren da sind, wie die gedacht war. Ja? Das heißt, dieses Interesse an Quantität, an Messen und an Zählen äußert sich in der Regel mit dem, was wir heute Archäologie nennen. Das ist auch ein Denken, das in der Zeit damals entstanden ist. Also Archäologie, man versucht spekulativ über die geschichtlichen Herkünfte, über die Ursprünge nachzudenken. Und zwar auf quantitative Weise. Ja? Weil auf qualitative Weise tun das ja alle Mythen. Also alle Städte, alle Religionen, die haben alle Anfangsmythen. Dieses Arche, was Anfang heißt. Aber was die Archäologie bedeutet und bedeutet hat, ist, dass man die gleichen Gedanken auf quantitative Weise, also nicht über das Bewerten, sondern über das Messen anfangen kann zu tun. Das äußert sich, das ist nur ein kleiner Vorschlag, um Ihnen das zu veranschaulichen. Bei Vitruv sind die Proportionen immer als Proportion formuliert. Das heißt, wir haben immer eine Viererkonstellation. Wir haben etwas im Verhältnis zu etwas, entspricht etwas anderes im Verhältnis zu etwas anderem. Was mit dem neuen Zahlendenken und der neuen Geometrie in der Renaissance passiert, ist, dass dieses Gleichheitszeichen, das wird gewissermaßen geschichtlich. Ja? Also man kapselt das A zu B in ein Ratio. Man bricht die Proportion auf in zwei Teile, in zwei Verhältnisse zueinander, die in unterschiedlicher Weise äquivalent sein können. Also das Gleichheitszeichen wird sowas wie der Projektionsraum. Das Gleichheitszeichen wird zum Nullpunkt im Koordinatensystem. Das heißt, darin kann man sich Modelle vorstellen. Die Dominanz oder das Aufkommen vom Architekturmodell in der Renaissance hat ganz viel mit genau dem zu tun. Ja? Was wir jetzt heute haben, ist wiederum neue Zahlen, neue Geometrie, neue Messinstrumente. Wir haben den komplexen Zahlenraum, die Probabilistik, das ist konstituierend für die Informationstechnik. Deswegen war es letztes Mal wichtig zu sagen, der Computer ist kein Rechner. Das heißt, der rechnet schon, man kann sagen, der Computer ist ein Rechner, aber der tut sehr, sehr, sehr vieles andere auch. Und die Frage, die uns mit diesem Thema Architekturtheorie und Quantität heute, also Gegenwartsarchitektur und Quantität, vor allem interessiert ist, okay, wir haben diese neuen Messinstrumente, finden wir auch eine neue Herangehensweise an Monumente der Klassik? Finden wir eine neue Herangehensweise aus diesem postmodernen Vervielfachen von Stilen? Ja? Nicht einen gemeinsamen Stil, sondern was ist eigentlich das andere zu Stilen in der Architektur? Weil das ist nämlich, was man Klassik nennt. Also finden wir eine neue Archäologie, um klassische Themen neu zu verstehen. Wir haben Ihnen mit diesem Interesse 2 Texte auf Tisch geladen zu dieser heutigen Sitzung. Das sind so etwas wie, wahrscheinlich müsste man sagen, Manifeste von Archizum, 1971 geschrieben. Ja, 71. Die Texte veranschaulichen sehr schön, wie das Thema der Quantität heute wichtig ist. Was sie postulieren, ist, wir sind Architekten, wir wollen Metropolis. Metropolis heißt Mutterstadt. Das heißt, das ist die Stadt, aus der alle Menschen, insofern sie gleich sind, also Menschen sind und nicht irgendwie eine bestimmte Rasse oder eine bestimmte Nationalität oder eine bestimmte Religion, sondern universell Menschen. Metropolis in der Neuzeit ist die Idee einer Stadt, wo die alle herkommen. Was jetzt dieses Manifest ausdrückt, ist, sagt, okay, das Metropolis, diese Idee kommt heute als Hauptstadt. Das heißt im Englischen the capital. Und das ist nicht zufällig, dass das the capital heißt, weil es sehr viel in der Ökonomie und in der Politik mit der Geschichte vom Kapitalismus zu tun hat. Wir sind heute ganz oft sehr schnell damit zu sagen, Kapitalismus ist das Übelste, was uns passieren konnte. Es ist die Quelle von allen Problemen, die wir heute haben. Aber wenn Sie das historisch anschauen, dann war Kapitalismus als Form von Ökonomie die Bedingung der Möglichkeit für Nationalstaaten, in denen es eigentlich, und das ist natürlich ein Ideal gewesen und das ist auch immer noch ein Ideal, aber trotzdem die Vorstellung wichtig wurde, dass es für alle Menschen gleich gilt. Ja, in einem Nationalstaat ist jeder gleich vor dem Gesetz, mit den gleichen Pflichten und den gleichen Rechten. Das ist ein neues Menschenbild. Die Ökonomien vorher, die waren immer in Klassen unterteilt. Und die Klassen hatten quasi naturalisierte Privilegien. Das ist, wo der Kapitalismus herkommt. Also, was jetzt Archizum beobachtet haben, ist, indem diese Metropolis, die wir alle wollen, zum Kapital wird, also ein Abbild von Kapitalismus, zu einer Hauptstadt wird, ist der Stadt immer schon eine bestimmte allgemeine Ideologie aufgeprägt. Und diese allgemeine Ideologie, so haben Sie das beschrieben, kommt daher, dass es einen Widerspruch gibt, der nicht aufzulösen ist, in dieser Idee der Gleichheit, die ökonomisch und politisch etabliert wird von einer Metropolis. Und dieser Widerspruch, so nennen die das in dem Manifest, sie sagen, entweder maximieren wir Quantity, das heißt Wohlfahrt, das heißt den Leuten, der Lebensstandard kann progressing sein, kann ansteigen, kann besser werden. Demgegenüber und scheinbar nicht vereinbar steht, wir wollen die Gleichheit maximieren, weil de facto gibt es ja immer noch sowas wie Klassen, aber nicht mehr naturalisierte. Das heißt, diese beiden Kräfte, so beschreiben Sie es, stehen in einem Widerspruch, der vom kapitalistischen Denken nicht aufgelöst werden kann. Sie sagen, und das ist Ihre Ausgangslage in dem Manifest, weil das so ist, wird sich diese schöne Idee der Metropolis verändern in nichts mehr als ein sehr großes Dorf. Ja, keine Stadt mehr, ein sehr großes Dorf. A very big village. Und das ist eine Perspektive, ich habe die jetzt hier ausgewählt, weil wir Architekturtheorie machen und das Architekten sind, aber das ist eine der Hauptthesen auch von Marshall McLuhan, wenn Sie den Namen schon mal gehört haben. Es war ein wichtiger Medientheoretiker, einer der Begründer von Medientheorie, der gesagt hat, mit der unmittelbaren Kommunikation, mit dem Ausbreiten der elektrischen Information gestalten wir ein globales Dorf. Was jetzt Archizum in diesem Manifest quasi in Aussicht stellen ist, es gibt ein Außen zu diesem Konflikt. Wir können ein Außen denken zu diesem Widerspruch zwischen Quantität und Balance. Und aus diesem Außen können wir eine Idee von Metropolis weiterdenken, so wie wir es eigentlich haben möchten. Und dazu, sagen Sie, müssen wir als Theoretiker uns herausnehmen aus dem Ideologiekampf. Das heißt, wir streiten nicht um die Werte, also um eine Anschauungsweise gegenüber eine andere, sondern wir müssen Architektur denken on the level of the quantitative challenge. Und quantitative challenge heißt, wir lassen uns noch nicht ein, was das bedeutet. Wir beobachten, wir registrieren, wir messen, wir konzentrieren, wir ordnen, aber wir halten Distanz dazu, zu erklären, was das bedeuten soll. Wir nehmen wahr, was sich verändert. Und das ist sehr stark, was wir in dieser Vorlesung auch tun möchten. Das ist so etwas wie ein Link in die Gegenwart. Es macht sehr viel Sinn, obwohl das historisch, glaube ich, nicht genau belegt ist, respektive Kohlhaas sehr wenige Referenzen angibt für sein Denken. Aber wenn Sie diese Texte lesen, dann ist der Bezug zu dem Interesse von Kohlhaas mit dem Delirious New York und auch mit dem Bigness, mit der Theorie der Bigness, extrem nahe. Also wenn Sie diese beiden Texte miteinander lesen, dann verstehen Sie, dass das eine Art von theoretische Geschichtsschreibung ist, die nicht versucht zu dokumentieren, was wirklich passiert ist, sondern das ist wirklich ein Diskurs, der wird weitergeführt und fortgesetzt. Und der ist sehr abstrakt. Das hier sind die 4 Fragen, die wir alle unsere Gäste in diesem Semester fragen möchten. Immer die gleichen Fragen, dass Sie ein Spektrum kriegen, was man dazu sagen kann. Wir würden gerne wissen, was sind für euch ganz persönlich wichtige Inspirationen aus dem Theoriediskurs? Dann wollen wir gerne wissen, worin sehen Sie heute diese Challenges? Was gilt es zur Kenntnis zu nehmen und eine Umgangsweise zu finden? Wie würden Sie das benennen? Die dritte Frage, metaphorisch jetzt, weil wir ja das Thema vom Tisch natürlich in diese Richtung thematisieren wollen. Wenn Sie jetzt quasi den Tisch decken für eine Klasse junger Architekten, denen Sie mitgeben wollen, was jetzt heute wichtig ist, was wäre auf diesem Tisch? Was müssten die gegessen haben? Wovon muss man sich nähren? Was ist wichtig? Und dann die vierte Frage, die ist ein bisschen abstrakter, das müssen wir schauen, dass wenn jemand Lust hat, so zu denken, dann freuen wir uns. Wenn das zu nichtssagend ist, dann können wir die auch unter den Tisch fallen lassen. Aber was uns ja eigentlich schon interessiert ist, welche Rolle spielt denn da jetzt dieser Tisch? Weil ein Tisch ist ja was anderes als ein Lehrplan oder ein Kanon oder eine Liste. Aber inwiefern ist der Tisch anders? Und was heißt es, wenn wir sagen, es gibt arbiträre Ordnungen, sozusagen. Das ist, was ein Tisch macht. Ja, der hat Umgangsformen, der hat Table Manners, der organisiert den sozialen Austausch, aber wie eigentlich? Wie macht der Tisch das? Und wie macht er das auf unterschiedliche Weisen? Ja, darauf werden wir zurückkommen am Ende vom Vortrag. Jetzt würde ich euch gerne Diana Alvarez-Marin und Miro vorstellen. Sie sind beides Architekten und Stadtplaner, glaube ich. I switch to English now, so they understand what I'm saying about them. Sorry. So, urban planners and architects, they're both working as researchers and PhD candidates at ETH Zurich. at the Institute for Information Technology and Architecture, the chair of computer-aided architecture. You will see in a moment how this translates. So they're not going to talk about how to draw computational models. They're going to talk about how to think when you draw computational models. And who are you when you are working with the computer? Questions like this. They will propose renderings of these questions into our popular culture. They will try to make connections of these abstract, philosophical, mathematical, also a bit sinister. No, quantity is always a bit sinister. It's not really joyful or pleasant. They will try to characterize this kind of thinking in ways that help you to perhaps connect a bit better with its relevancy. So, very happy that you are both here. Who is starting? You are.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. So we come from ETH Zurich, from the chair for computer-aided architectural design, and I think what brings all of us together is a kind of an interest in information technologies. So how information technologies, this phenomena of information and data, how they influence the world, how they influence architecture, and how these phenomena change the way we think about the world and as well as architecture. Do you want to add something for the introduction?
No.
Okay, so we will try to discuss about brands from two different perspectives. So I will start first, and I would like to talk about the void, brands, characters, and how to deal with the lot, or how to deal with the many of a lots. By playing with branding, mediating, curating, measuring, communicating, and coding. And this story that I'm telling, so it's not scientific and it's not artistic. So it's architectural in always being a part of both traditions. So its elements are in principle already existing. So they are ready to be found around if one can see them, if one can acknowledge them. And this story, like architecture, is about bringing all these elements and parts in relation. So it's about articulating constellations with an ever-increasing amount of parts. And of course, the challenge is how to deal with the lot, how to deal with this big plenty, with the abundance as an architect. And why and how would we even think in these terms? So I will give a certain context. So the context are aliens, mutants, migrants, cyborgs, and avatars. And I would say that they are fascinating. Yeah? So how can we talk to them? How can we ask them questions, for instance, like, where do you live? What is your world like? And so on. So how do they mingle with other objects? How do they merge with other objects? What is natural for them? Is their nature different than our nature? And so on. And if you look around, we will see more and more of them. But if we try to focus, then we will not be able to see them. So neither they nor us are pure. So they always come in different mixtures. In mixtures of different creatures, of different worlds, of reality and fiction, of different media, of different concepts. And this is actually what makes them interesting, but on the other hand, impossible to understand. So there are no more kind of categories or labels or boxes. We could say that we are talking in terms of clouds and crystals. And we could say that they live on internet, on the Google planet, and they hang out with other avatars and other aliens. And social media could be their means of transport and a manner how they articulate each other or render their faces. And of course they have many faces. And they can tell a lot of different stories. And branding would be one way how they express themselves. Bitcoin could be a way how they could trade. And of course they like internet, yeah? They like the web and they like information. And maybe they are information. So if we look at them as virtual or actual, however, they influence our world. So they give us the ability to have many faces. Actually, we could say that they are us. So we can have many avatars, many virtual identities, and we can play with them. But then the question is how to play this game. So how to deal with the lot? How to deal with brands that articulate the generic ground, with characters that write and constitute this branding, while at the same time extending and generating and producing ever more and more. So we can say that brands, characters, and the lot, that they change their places. So they articulate each other around the void. But void in what sense? With what meaning? So what does it mean to have an empty center? Or what does it mean to have an empty container? So what is a symbol that can symbolize anything, that can symbolize something that we don't even have a name for instance, like X? Or can we think of void in terms of a spectrum? Can void have qualities and quantities? Or as Karen Barat says, can we measure nothingness? Or as Lucretius says, what we term void exists as an ingredient in things. So I think this is very interesting to think of void as an ingredient in things. So how can this emptiness have qualities and quantities? So a void on which projections are projected to merge with other projections. And we can think of these projections as characters that are encodings of a lot. And I think Emperor in Barthes' Tokyo can be thought of as one of those characters. So what in this beautiful book, The Empire of Science, Barthes says, the city I'm talking about, Tokyo, is this one, offers this precious paradox. It possesses a center, but the center is empty. The entire city turns around a sight both forbidden and indifferent. A residence concealed beneath a foliage protected by moats, inhabited by an emperor who is never seen, which is to say, literally, by no one knows who. So all power resides in a kind of an empty center, encoded in characters of emperor, power, tradition, institution, society, and hierarchy. So it's very similar to the British Queen, which has all the power which she can never use. So on one side, we have these characters that can encode a lot, and on the other side, we have characters that write and constitute brands. So I find this another very beautiful example with Claude Lévi-Strauss in his structural study of myth. He tells a similar story, and his character there is a mythical hero, a Greek god, an avatar. So a character that is so empty that it can be loaded with new meanings repeatedly for more than 2,000 years. So it's a kind of an empty, consistent center which is always in motion. So he says, on the other hand, it cannot be too strongly emphasized that all available variants should be taken into account. There is no one true version of which all the others are but copies or distortions. Every version belongs to the myth. So this means all the different kind of stories of the myth, they are in a way its structure. So every version changes the structure in a bit. So I find this a kind of a very beautiful way how to think of it. So it's very similar to a specific alphabet or a framework to a particular thinking. So it's a kind of a tradition without origin and history, but it's playing with it. Or for instance, to put it in different terms, which characters could constitute a fashion brand. So what is interesting, I think, with fashion, so you have every season a kind of a new collection, new episodes. They're always consistent in a way, they are never too explicit. So they articulate the same brand in different manners. So imagine this scenario. So this is a kind of a very fancy brand that just recently moved to Zurich from Paris, Vetements. So what they do, they take a kind of a ready-made concept or an artifact. This is this kind of DHL T-shirt. So they even don't say it's Vetements, yeah? So it's DHL. Or for instance, they take a kind of a street style street style ready-made. Huh? And then what they do with this street style ready-made, they send it to Venice, to Art Biennale. Of course, they don't send it in an explicit way, but in an implicit way. And you can see in the German pavilion on Venice Biennale that all these people, they are actually dressed like they come from Vetmont, and they walk in the art exhibition as they are on a fashion piece. By doing so, they get a golden lion. Huh? And this is the lady that gets the golden lion, Anne Imhoff. So she is the main artist. She wears a Balenciaga hat, which is a kind of super high fashion brand. At the same time, talking about, on the website, it's a very reactionary text, almost a kind of a Marxist text behind. At the same exhibition, her partner, who is a model for this Balenciaga, is again walking there in these terms. Yeah? And as being a model, she's also an artist, and in her time she paints paintings with Vetmont soxes. Yeah? And the guy who is behind both Vetmont and Balenciaga is this kind of guy, and he wears an IKEA t-shirt, an IKEA jacket, which is produced by Vetmont. So this is a kind of a very interesting way how you create a certain constellation or a certain branding. So it's a kind of an in-between, floating between fashion and art. You are mixing avatars and brands, Marxism and luxury. You make them dance around a kind of an empty center. And what is beautiful that you cherish and emphasize contradictions. So having a Balenciaga cap and a kind of a Marxist background of the exhibition, it just makes people curious in a way. So you have to make it public and visible, collect kind of likes, and then you get this beauty of dancing around a certain void. So these are these kind of specific articulations. And what is in the background, of course, is a lot of videos, images, stories, capital, abundance, decadence, and all these things. But then the question would be, where is this empty center in architecture? So if this is a kind of a generic plane of architecture which is articulated by Art Daily, so the question would be, where can we put an empty center or a kind of an axis to revolve our avatars around? Because what we have here is a lot. So we have all these kind of different beautiful objects, and they're articulated in different ways, with different fashions, with different kind of pictures, with different kind of styles, ideas. Behind these are kind of theories and ideas on cities, on objects, on architecture, and so on. So how do we start playing with these things? So what is this all about? In principle, we don't know, and we can never know, but that's the beauty of it. So it's a kind of a position without having a fixed point, a void. It's an attitude. And the question is how to surf in this vertigo. So how to deal with this media, with this information, and how are prominent architects doing it? What are their strategies? Because there is no clear strategy. It's always a kind of an interplay of surfing, navigating, learning, and playing in the world of a lot. And then we have this kind of a usual scenario of dissolvement, which people try to present, which is a kind of a creation of a void. Of course it is, but it's as well an articulation of the generic, where we go from a book, which has a kind of a very specific vector, a certain idea, towards a magazine where we multiply or collect these kind of ideas. Then we take them to infinity on the internet with online blogs. Then we index them and create communities around certain social media, and in the end we index them to everything, with for instance Google. So it's a kind of a story which goes from Pritzker to Google. And I think what would be very interesting is not to look at it as a kind of a linear dissolvement, but as a kind of encapsulation which refers to each other. So they, in principle, enrich each other. And then the question is how to develop and attitude. And I think this is what the digital it brings to the table. So as Sam Jacobs says, it's not the end of history, but an intensifying and multiplying of histories or of historicities. So the time is not going linearly anymore, but it's percolating, it's circular spiral, so we have this kind of past and future, and pre, post, neo, retro, futuristic, with bio and techno, and all of this is a kind of a question of taste and a question of choice. So it's digital and immediate. So we have a porn and drama mix in a new kind of a public space, around a new kind of a literacy of a quantum city. And of course this is not new. So all the 20th century architects, they were already dealing with a lot. So as a kind of an answer or reaction to less is more, we have all these kind of answers like less is a bore, I'm a whore, more and more is more, yes is more, and so on. So all these guys in the 20th century, they could not look away from complexity, contradictions, junk, genericness, capital brands, and all these things. So they try to engage with a lot, each in its own way. So then it becomes a kind of a spectrum of architectural cliches. Each one gets a certain parole, and then they are pushing it. But how to step out of this and not try to judge it, but try to take these paroles in a serious way and think about them. So for instance, how can we scan 10, 20, or 30 years of architectural universe? How to think about what is it about? And I think to get there, we need to think about information. So we need to develop an attitude. And with avatars, bots, Google, cryptocurrencies, social media, and so on, they already are playing this game. So maybe we can learn a little bit from them. But then the question is, of course, how, as a person, as an individual, or as an identity, you can behave in this world. So this should be much different than your old or than my old teacher. So because it should be a different world. So if we make a kind of a task that a 20th century teacher cannot even imagine to be possible, so let's scan 10 years of online architectural publishing in one afternoon. This is great, and then make a kind of a sense of it, or make a meaning out of it. And to be able to do it, we need to play with information. So we need to store, deal, emit, and receive information. We need to encrypt and decrypt, to open the crypt and translate its contents into another space. So it would be a kind of a way to write poems in a language which is not natural. So it would be a coding as a literacy. And now let's try to find faces of blocks, or let's try to curate the curators. So to get a feeling of what is going around, I will try to scan two main architectural blocks, Design and Art Daily. So they are the curators. So there are two different versions of articulating what's going on in architecture. And they're the most prominent and the most liked on the network. And I would like to use their identities in order to articulate my own. So I want to get to know them better. I want to scan them, like Google does. And the focus here is on images. And just to see, for instance, that in 2008, with ArcDaily and Design, it was around 2,500 images per year, while in 2016, it's around 30,000 images per year. And there's going to be more and more of them. So what to do? How to collect, curate, mediate, and measure all these images. So if we think of internet and web as a novel or as a different kind of public space, how do we behave in this digital agora? So its institutions are not explicit. Its codes and manners of behavior are not taught at school. So it's being articulated via a new kind of literacy in a quantum city on an informational planet by a new kind of citizens. And what I find very interesting is that this digital agora is not anymore only reserved for actors like Google or Amazon or Facebook. So anyone is welcome to participate on this digital agora. So what if we start playing the game? So what if we say, I want to scan everything, I want to take snapshots. It's all public. So as a person in this new public space, one behaves like Google. And what's very interesting and what I find really exciting is that it's possible with a computer, and you as a person can play and do this kind of games. And suddenly one is dealing with hundreds and thousands of computational or informational objects, or with information, and one is not being afraid of them. And so one way would be just go directly in. So crawl, search, articulate, do filters, use a kind of machine learning, write a poem or code a couple of poems and play. Make sense of what is in fashion now. So try to compose your own online mask by playing with data. So let's take what's public from online publishing. Let's try to walk in this public space. And the first steps in this kind of walk would be to write a crawler, to write a poem. And this in principle is not complicated. This would be one such poem. And this poem...
Can you talk with the big microphone? It's quite...
Yeah.
It's not loud enough.
Okay, so once... Oh, wow. Sorry. So once this is one such poem.
Switch off the other one? No?
No, okay. So if we run this poem, we get directly on ArcDaily, we see what's going on. These are the new articles from today. And now we would like, for instance, to collect all the images from the first article. Now he's going, okay, these are the images. And if we go and check on ArcDaily, we take the first article, which is this one, and we see, okay, so this is working. Then in principle, we can go to the second article and so on. And by having this small poem and one afternoon, in principle, we can take everything what's online on ArcDaily. We just take it all. Then we write another poem for another online magazine, for another interest, and we have it for another topic of research. And in this case, this is the zine. So together, these platforms, they provide around 500,000 of images. And you as a person can have it in one afternoon, no problem. But now the question is, how do we look? So when you have 500,000 images, so what to do? How do we look? How do we deal with them? How do we deal with this a lot? So to play this informational play, ArcDaily and the zine, they need to get kind of identities, new kind of identities, or maybe they can get a lot of these kind of identities. So they need to be translated to numbers. They need to be informationally encoded. They need to become vectors. And then the question is, how do we measure? What is the unit of the zine? So one should, in a way, articulate the unit and the measure. And what is interesting here is that it's not anymore the universal measuring device with the base unit. It should be something different. But this doesn't mean that we should leave or forget these beautiful units that we have that in a way united our civilization, with second, meter, kilogram, and so on. This would be just another way to think of units, which should complement this one. Barat says measurements are world-making. Matter and meaning do not pre-exist, but rather are co-constituted via measurements interaction. So matter and meaning do not pre-exist. This is, I think, very beautiful. But on the other hand, measurements are world-making. Yes, of course, but the world makes the measurement as well. So how do we abstract from this, in principle, never-ending loop? So what if we think of this process from a different perspective? So what if it's not about measuring images, but it's about encrypting and decrypting? So what if it's about making profiles and informational phases. So then it's a different kind of game. So one is not seeking for specific properties and measuring them, but one is trying to develop a channel through which one can articulate profiles of different encodings. And this, for instance, we have with electricity. So it's energy, it's matter, it's information, it can be a wave or a particle, depending how we would like to have it. And as with the branding of the brands with McMahon, these different co-constitutions, they can contradict each other, and it's not a problem. It even makes it more beautiful. So how do we make profiles, spaces, or encryptions of blocks by looking at them from the perspective of images? So can image become a kind of a letter that can articulate a block? And because there is no unit of imageness. So then, because of this, we try to encode different frequencies to make informational phases. And let's play a game and take, for instance, the Hamburg Philharmonie and try to make an informational phase out of it. Yeah? So we can do this in many ways. So for instance, one is a kind of looking at the most frequent color in a specific region. So we can get for this a numerical value. Or we can try to look at the edges or at the structure of the image, the frequency of white pixel in a specific region. So this will be this kind of numbers. Or we can measure certain measures, for instance, that this program has inside, like median, standard deviation, energy, entropy, and so on. Or we can transform images into waves with the Fourier transformation, get the kind of complex numbers around it. Or we can do identify images and get certain kind of indexes to what this image might be. And of course, all the time we can change the resolution of these things. Yeah? So we can put different kind of resolutions, and then we will get a different kind of an informational phase. And what's interesting is that this would be a way how to encrypt or how to encode an image. And how do we do? Yeah, of course we can put different images. And now if we take this to infinity, yeah? If we take this to infinity, what we get is an informational phase of a block. So these are all the images together that can articulate a phase or a mask of a block. And this in principle is open. So we can do this in many ways. And I think what's interesting here that we are beyond subjective and objective. And none of these encodings are in themselves good or bad. So the measurement as such becomes just a part of encoding process. So it becomes a cipher open to many different articulations. And by this, the communication channel is open, and then cryptography, measurement, and communication are interwoven in a very interesting and delicate way. Okay, now let's play with this. Yeah? Let's take all 500,000 images. Let's use machine learning, in this case self-organizing net, where then similar encodings would come close together, they would like each other. And this is this is all. Yeah? So we have this kind of an informational materiality which is encoded in a specific way, and we play with this. And now let's decrypt, decode, or decipher and render these things. So we get a kind of an architectural mutant of Ardeli and Lezen, an artistic cloud. So 10 years of architecture as an impression, or as a rendering, or as a face. And here we have it. So it's almost like a weather forecast of architecture. And the interesting thing that we can, if we change the encodings, we can get different kind of consistencies, we can get different kind of resolutions, we can get different things out of it. So it's up to us how we want to encode and how we want to render these things. But by having it, we can render it in many different ways. Or one other way would be, of course, to render it as this kind of an infinite map. But this is in principle a question of choice. So we can do a different rendering. We can split this mutant into different parts, into our daily and the Zen individually, and then we can look at them, for instance, by year. This would be something like this. So this is a kind of the Zen, postcards of the Zen by year. And here what we can see that with the Zen, it's around architecture and it's around design. So if we put, for instance, the art daily, then we get a different kind of rendering again by year, and here we can see that they like drawings more. I mean, now one can interpret this however he or she likes. So, but what is interesting here is that we get a kind of an idea what kind of compositions, what kind of colors, what kind of objects, what kind of flavors, what kind of moods are in fashion today, or what kind of moods and fashions were here 10 years ago. Just by writing these short poems, we are playing with all of this. So what's fascinating is that we are working with millions. Or if we take, for instance, just the Zine, yeah? So we have a year 2017 and 2007. And what is interesting here, now I'm just storytelling, is that I think the 2017 is a little bit more complicated, so it has more content inside. So these images are animated, they are vivid, they are always in specific context, while in 2007, you have a lot of these images that wanted to be idealized on a kind of a blank paper or in a blank room without any content. They would like to be special in a way. And then what is interesting is that we can measure in a way the entropy or the disorder of these images. And what is a kind of a funny thing is that then we can see that that this entropy in principle is rising in the last 10 years. So this would be a kind of a fashion in dealing with objects in architecture. And now, let's search for flavors. Let's try to find a little bit of branding. So we can look for constellations of concepts. Yeah, so we will just take out certain things to look at them. So here we can see a set of plants. Or if we go here, we can look at something what might be patterns. But what I think is very interesting here is that we, in principle, never specified what is a pattern, or what is a plan, or what is an object. Or what even gets more interesting is that with certain things, we cannot name them. Yeah? They in principle are consistent in themselves, but there is no category. So for instance, how would we name this? So it's a consistency, it's a kind of a flavor behind, but we don't know what or how to name it. Or if we go inside of each cell, because this represents the whole world of our daily and design, and if you go inside of each cell and look what is going on, I have to hurry up. So if we look what's going on, we can see that they are really consistent in themselves. So each one produces a certain flavor, a certain feeling, a certain consistency. And we never, in principle, specify all these things. So it's based just on different encodings, on different cipherings of these images. And now, if we can use this as a way to articulate our own brand. So how can I make my own mask and play with this? So how can a taste become a filter or a mask? Okay, I will just show this and then that's it. So for instance, I can say what I like. So I would like certain patterns, I would like certain drawings, certain architectural objects with a little bit of green varnish and so on. And I would like to now articulate my mask according to this empty center or according to this kind of an axis. I would like to revolve a certain brand. But of course, the beauty of all of this is that I can revolve many brands around it. Yeah? And I would say, okay, so this is my mask. If I articulate via those filters, I could get this kind of a personal mask. And that's what I like. So this would be my empty center of today. And of course I can do this for different kind of moods, for different kind of flavors. And now maybe a similar story through a different point of view. Sorry if I'm too long.
No.
Do you have a question? So I think it might be necessary for me to follow it up the next lecture part. And I think that, so I understand the method of the selection and to see it not in a positive and negative way, but what is the question behind it? There's the possibility of doing it, but what is the reason or the explicit standing behind all these methods? I didn't get that.
Can you repeat the question so everyone?
She's asking which is the question, or which is the reason to develop all these methods, more concisely. We can answer.
Can I quickly? So it's great that you're asking the questions, but these can be spared for after the presentation. We can skip the questions that we want to ask you, because you can answer to us in written and we put it on this, and then there is time for questions. That's great. But because the two are very much connected.
Okay. Yeah, because I didn't get really the sense. I think I seem like I can't follow it really, because I didn't get
Yeah. So the overall theme is, what are the contemporary ways of measurement? How do we deal with data in a way that is measuring? And what are we doing with it? That's in many ways the question we all ask. So it's not like there's an easy answer to your question. So this is what we can do. And a lot of people with these kinds of methods, they make predictions. I mean, that's how Trump came to power, no? So they measure your profile on the internet, then they figure out who you are, they send you commercials, so you vote for this or that. So these kinds of measurements get here. So our question is, how else can we deal with these kinds of measurements?
Okay, I would say just let yourself immerse, and we can discuss later. So now we continue in a similar mood, but we're working with spoken, written, speech words. And for this, I would like to invite you to the table, which means we will have a banquet sitting at the table with 100 architects. But before sending this invitation, I would like to say a short prelude, because we should keep in mind that the data we are selecting and that we are putting on this table is not the world. It's a projection of ourselves in the world, which means it's not objective, and there's intentionality in the way we choose the things that we want to bring at the table. This means that the table does not perceive the world, but it can be articulated in the terms and in the attitude within which we want to look at the world. Two important things. Let's take it as a game that needs a lot of data. Without data, there is no game. And second, we are entering a ground that leaves the world of this dichotomy between objective and subjective, which means that in a way, we lose this notion of truth and absoluteness, but we are entering more in a world of negotiation and validity of arguments within a certain channel, within a certain space of discussion. And this story, this banquet, is more as an scenario that illustrates an attitude, a way of thinking, and from which you can draw your own conclusions. So let's get to the table and let's dive into this public space that we call internet. We will tap into this wealth of indexes and gather everything. Written speech, theories, manifestos, interviews, competition briefs, project presentation, it's all there. This big plenty is abundant. We are not it, we are not in it, but we live with it. And this distinction is important. So let's play with allegory and imagine that this planted is a banquet where everything is fundamentally available. So we can imagine a table which is really, really full. But banquets, before being banquets, as we know them, used to be called ceremonies of the void, because the purpose of these banquets ultimately was to make the table empty. And that's why we serve dessert at the end of the dinner. It's this culmination of creating this void. So, I invite 100 contemporary architects to the table, most of them young, emerging after the year 2000, and some of the, let's say, some of their architectural heroes. So we go from Pritzker to Google. And where they're going to sit next to one another, eat next to one another, which means they will establish a metabolic relationship, which is something which allows for circulation. If we are talking about void, we are interested, of course, in circulation. And as we start, my guests are really excited to come to this banquet, and they're extremely loud. They make noise, but they're not able to communicate. They just talk on their own. All these messages, all these rumors, they collapse, but they are announcing some kind of exchange, which is not happening yet. And then, in the middle of this rumor, I can ask my guest anything I want, and I will always get an answer based on this index, on this pointer that I'm touching to ask them. So, for instance, I decide to ask them, what is architecture for you? And all of a sudden, I get a list of concepts that emerge of different ideas of what architecture in the 20th century could be, 21st century could be. We could say architecture is never implicit, architecture is one of the keys for the construction of a more competitive and sustainable society, and so on. But I could agree or not with this, but it's just there, fundamentally available. But there's not a conversation just yet. Let's say that this is a monologue. Each one of them is just talking to him or herself. Then, on the table, I place what is given, the data. And this banquet is data hungry. So I ask my guest to pay the dinner, because it's really good food. I ask my guest to pay the dinner in good words. And what I get is a first exhibition of what their main common interests are. So it seems a little bit obvious, but at first what I get is this persistence of certain indexes that are coming up really strongly. They are architects. So they will talk about build, theory, project, space, formal design, work, style, space, and so on. But still, there's no conversation. And what I notice about these box of words that start appearing on the table is that they are continuous. And I don't know how to touch them. Then the question comes, what do I do when something is continuous? How do I touch this thing which is on the table? I don't know yet. Where to start? So like I would do in any dinner, I stretch out my hand with politeness and with discretion and start cutting up the pieces, which means I am evoking the question of the unit. Which is my unit? How I'm going to touch this thing? And it comes with my question. What do I want to know? I mean, this big thing is there. I can ask fundamentally anything I want. So if my question is, which are the emerging concepts in contemporary architecture? Maybe I'm interested in words, not in vowels, not in letters, not in paragraphs, not in sentences, but in words. So let's say that for today, my choice is that my unit, the word is my minimal unit. And then I say, let's be done this way. And this is what happens when I partition what is on the table. I get a bag of words. And how do I deal with these words? And I treat them, then I start thinking, well, there's a lot of it. How to treat this thing without getting lost? And I start treating these words in the most meaningless of ways. Which means my words become pointers. They are hollow things, which means even in the most minimal unit, I'm experiencing this void. And what is a pointer? Is something which is hollow and which is always directing, indexing, pointing towards something else which is not itself, but towards everything else which surrounds it. And this is how I decide to treat my works. And let's say that these words, these hollow things, are spinning around themselves in the same way that the food and the wine are circulating around the table. And all of a sudden, I get a bunch of small creatures, really excited and vibrant, which are sitting around the table. Which means I don't have any more these indexes which were with meaning, telling me very specific things about architecture, but I get bundles of relationships. And here they are, my architects, under this different render. But the question that comes when I have these bundles of relationships sitting at the table is, then how do I look at them? I know which my unit is, but what about measurement? How do I measure this? And what I realize is that there's modus in measurement. This means that there's manner, there's intentionality. It's not an objective thing. It's not something which is given. It's something that I need to articulate in my own terms and that comes in relationship to my question. And I know that my creatures sitting at the table, they can be looked at through 9, 20, 100, 1,000 different lenses. The amount of lenses that I use to look at these creatures is irrelevant. It all depends on the intention that I have for tonight. For instance, here we have, let me render this again, Alejandro Aravena, seen under 9 different lenses. None is right, none is wrong. They are just valid answers within a certain space of discussion. But still, we don't communicate just yet, because we haven't established yet these channels for communication. So impatience and excitement are rising at the table because we want to talk. But we need to define this space first, and we do it through a dictionary, which means we're going to define a finite set of things that are going to remain on the table. We're going to list those things that all of us, all the commensals sitting at the table can have a saying on. So for this, I take my bag of words and I start trimming it from the bottom and from the top. This means I get rid of everything which is anecdotic, which means someone said it once, but it's meaningless for someone else, or it doesn't relate to some of the creatures. And I will get rid from the obvious, which means this that everybody is persistently talking about, like architecture, space, work, project design. I know it already, it's a given. And in the anecdotic part, I mean, pizza, Shoreditch, Concord is way too specific, because these two sides of my bag of words, they become noise if I keep them. So food and wine keep circulating on the table, and the more they keep on circulating, now that we have our common channel, our dictionary, the more we start relating, and the more we can start sharing this body or this matrix. And as we measure, we characterize these hollow markers, these, I don't want to call them words anymore, and we project vertical axes. We transform them into vectors. And this is the phases that these hollow markers start getting, which means each one of my guests sitting at the table have a different saying. Here I have 101 points, 101 numbers, and this is what each one of my guests has to say about this specific index. And now that we have this, we can communicate. Now we talk, and we like affinity, so we follow it. And these words circulate on the table, and as they circulate, the guests start mingling. They start flirting with one another. They agglomerate with flavor and nuance. And all of a sudden, my table has a completely different look. It's become a landscape of intensities. And what we have here, we could call it a concept map, because we could say that each one of these little boxes that you cannot read yet, and we're going to look into it, it's a virtual distinction or a concept. Let's look a little closer. So we zoom in. We want to see what's going on. Let me reduce this. Yes. Okay. And these are two different areas on my concept map. If I look to the left, or if I listen closely to what's going on the left of the screen, what I see is maybe a conversation about some kind of expensive urban development in China. I hear about commercial, pedestrian, restaurant, concert, expansion, hotel, rich, etc. I can start with these indexes that circulate around a center void, and I can start constituting a story of what could be on this side of the table. To the right, I have a completely different discussion. I hear about scenario, actor, author, agent, phenomenon, trend, maybe some more fundamental or intellectual or theoretical discussion of what architecture could be about. And this is the beauty, is that around my table, around this void, I have the circulation of all these different stories about what architecture could be, which means that gives me the possibility of preserving this richness. And later on, of projecting myself on this landscape in order to articulate my own mask. And this is how my 100 architects as well, they start projecting themselves on this table. They take a more stable seat on the table, which means they are not frozen, but they find some kind of stability because they found relationships that they can be interested in. And this is when I say that now they have faces, and they look at us, and they look at one another. They have become public characters sitting at the table. And this is how they look. This is each one of their faces as they project on this conceptual map. And I keep on looking a little bit closer. And I see that more intimate conversations are taking place at the table. Just a second. Let's look at a single conversation. I like to listen what my guests are saying at the table. So what I find here is a diagonal exchange between Bjarke Ingel and Mary Oxman. And what we can notice is that they don't like each other too much because they like to sit at different places on the table. Bjarke, let's see what they are talking about, why they prefer to sit so far away from one another tonight. So Bjarke stands in for an architecture of solutions, answers, challenges, decision-making. He wants to give precise answers and precise solutions to problems. He is a yes man. And Mary, she's exploring a completely different conceptual space at the table tonight. She explored concepts about morphology, fabrication. She's flirting with biology, mathematics, computation. And we could look even a little bit deeper and see what they actually say in this public space, which is internet. So Bjarke will talk about proactive architecture, field of interest, proposals, competitions, the chance of success, formulated the problem and its solution before anyone else. So the language he's using is it addresses a very specific space at the table. And Neri will talk about biological age, dynamic design possibilities where products and structures can grow, as we master the unnatural processes at a speed and sophistication that dwarfs evolution, material ecology propels us into the age where we model nature by design. So they don't want to talk to one another just tonight. And the closer I look, I realize that both Bjarke and Neri and everybody else, they have made their own circle of affinities. But their concordance at this very moment is mobile and is palpitating. They like similarity and they celebrate similarity and difference at the same time while they look at this position of the table. And I could say that they cluster, but I don't want to put a label to these relationships. Because if I label them, I freeze them, I kill them. And I want to keep this palpitating quality of these relationships. So here we have, and I realized that each one of them have made their own friends. On the top, Neri's friends. Who is there? We have Bernard Cash, Greg Lin, Achim Menges, Michael Hansmeyer, Benjamin Dillenburger, and so on. And Bjarke's friends are Zaha Hadid, Jean Nouvel, Julian Deschmet, Liebes Kind. And all of a sudden, I can articulate meaning around these relationships that have been created. On the top, architects who are interested in computation and technology, and below, big firms who are interested in playing on the big global competitions. So my guests, as I hope and anticipated, are not standing still. They change positions and they mingle, and they gather and they flirt, and they remain porous, and they remain flexible, and they are magnetic. But I don't want to call these relationships a style or a dogma. Maybe I could start talking of these relationships as something that belongs to, or similar to, a brand, a myth, an atmosphere, a weather, a characterization. And I could go on and look a little bit deeper. 3 architects, Ishigami, Philip Ham, Toyo Ito. 2 Japanese architects. In the middle, Philip Ham, a Swiss architect who's interested in art installations and meteorological phenomena. And the indexes that I see emerging are about weather, platform, transformation, climate. And I see the emergence of this story through these indexes. And then I walk towards another side of the table. Just a second. And I could go on, but let's continue. I have a different group of friends in here: Mazzanti, Urban Think Plan, Fake Industries, Ecosistema Urbano, which are firms which are more interested in social approaches to architecture, or Christian Gambate, Metro, and so on. But the interesting thing is that these stories and affinities and conversations that I've heard tonight at the table, they are not absolute, and they are not the truth. They are not a theory, but they are just one version of the many possible. They are just one way of seeing how these architects can relate to one another. Because with every observation, if I change my unit, or if I change the measurement that I want to enact towards this unit, I'm changing the whole space of the table, and brand new faces and affinity would be able to emerge. And then I could say that in another world, my architects would take completely different seats at the table. So here we see, horizontally, a few architects, a dozen of architects, and vertically, I see different ways of relating to one another. It's a different evening, it's a different dinner, it's a different question, it's a different unit, a different measurement. And this is why they are not the truth, and they are not absolute. They are articulated. And with all these different articulations or realities simultaneously appearing under my sight, I can establish a new kind of conversation. What if I make these different views talk to one another? Which means I'm encapsulating things, like in an onion ring. And if I make these different views, or these different dinners talk to one another, then all of a sudden my conceptual map inverts, which means that these cells are not anymore inhabited by words. They still are concepts, but this time they are inhabited by architects themselves. So let's say that this would be the selfie of our dinner tonight, because everybody there is sitting at the table. On one corner, at the bottom, I have, as expected, Neri Oxman, Greg Lin, Christian Peretz, Benjamin Dillenburger. At the other side, I have architectural theory, Robert Venturi, Peter Einzelmann, Werner Kasch, Philip Johnson, Maydin, and so on. And where am I sitting at the table? This is important, because my observations have a role in how this dinner happened tonight. And I'm sitting here. Then I want to know who are my friends, who wants to sit with me at the table. And I see I'm surrounded by Plan B, Bjarke Ingels, Glenn Murcutt, CISA, Lacaton Vassal, HDM. And I realize, well, these are big firms who are interested in branding. And perhaps, because today I was talking about branding for architects, my seat at the table was meant to be this one tonight. But this is just one of the possible characters that I decided to be tonight. It could be or go in a completely different way. I could have completely different desires, a different client, a different question, a different approach to architecture. And this is the beauty, that I have the possibility of being a mutant and of articulating this multiplicity of faces that allow me to embody multiplicity of identities. And this is maybe my brand for today. And just as a culmination, then I would like to say that the space of communication between different natures, this is my table, and they are not real categories, but concepts or visual distinctions, and they are blurred, and they produce fascinating hybrids. And in this world, at this banquet, on this table, one night, I might indulge in love affairs with the neighbor sitting next to me, but another evening, we might distance for one another as far as this space of conversation allows. But there's no pure reality and there's no pure fiction, but articulation of meaning, the meaning which is within me. Avatars, aliens, and these hybrid creatures inhabit this world of data, this digital public space. They live on internet, they talk on social media, and they carry these maps or these faces to multiply their identities. Their currency is information, and branding is their form of expression. Perhaps then a brand comes from burning. It was this mark that used to be put on the animals to say that they belong to someone. But all of a sudden, I would like to say that perhaps a brand is not that static thing that remains fixed to forever, burned on your skin, but is something more dynamic, something that is effervescent, organic, and changeable. And it's exactly the constitution of this mask and brands that allows us to articulate the new public and private space in the digital. And this is how we become accountable and we become adults as citizens of the digital. Because all of a sudden we get the responsibility of the accountability to articulate these spaces. They are not given any longer. We articulate them by defining the faces or the masks that we want to carry. What is what we want to encrypt or decrypt in relationship to other. And this is the big plenty that we live with, where we are figures, masks, indexes, characters, avatars, and we articulate, infuse, narrate, take seat at the table. And this is who we can be in the world of the big plenty. We are at home here. That's it.
pick up and start giving elements of answer. Please stay with me. Thank you. I think what is beautiful about what you say and what you articulate, it really relates to what we all know. I mean, brands, blogs, plenty of images, information, and also how do you not lose a sense of self within this pure quantity? When everything constantly changes, how do you keep a sense of self? So I think what is beautiful is how the methods and the apparatuses and the stories you tell are not reducing anything. They are measuring without entering reductionism. They are keeping everything vibrant and as rich as it is. They're just offering ways to relate to and ways to talk to and ways to understand the world in which we all move. And I think if you think of how research, for example, or understanding of the world has very often been described like looking for a little stash, no? And here, the little you will never find because first of all you need to understand what the stash is. So, yeah, I think, maybe just to go back to the questions, I think what you were, you were mentioning terms and data, and just think of fake news. I mean, fake news are not fake. The moment they are sufficiently repeated, they produce a reality. So they are somehow predictive in a sense. So your question exactly was, how do you...
Should I give her the mic so she can speak herself?
What was the question?
Okay, should I say the question once again?
Yeah, your question was, what was the question?
Yeah, okay. The question was to, I understand the fascination and I understand the methods you're trying to tell us how to deal with all this, but I didn't get the base of it. So what is then behind it? What is the question, the search you're looking for? So is there something, or it's just a looking for methods without anything behind it?
Thank you. I pass the mic on to Miro since he was originally addressed at you.
So, I mean, it's definitely we are in a certain space, yeah, where we cannot ignore this phenomenon. So it's happening. So we are surrounded with the abundance of information, with the abundance of data. The different communities articulate these things in different ways. So as an architect, this, in my opinion, is not the way how you will get a specific design. Yeah? So out of this, you don't articulate the design, but you learn the way how to think, how to deal, how to navigate around this new world which is coming out. And so this so with different communities, we have kind of different articulation of spaces. And these spaces can be in contradiction to each other. You don't follow.
I would like to say.
You're being for discipline yourself, so for theory, discipline, which is searching for yourself, or you're trying to find new reasons to develop architecture, or I don't know.
I would say it's a kind of a way to think.
An architectural way to think.
Or, in terms of architecture, in terms of the world in general.
Yeah. But it's not in the quest or in the search for improving tools, not at all. It's really about how to empower yourself, or how to deal when everything is available. What do you do? How do you not get lost? How do you take position and how do you make questions? And the thing is, it can be any question, because the question is within you and each one of us.
So it's really more about the methods, how to deal with it, than having a solution behind it. Is that right?
It's both, but the question is palpitating. It's not fixed, and that's the beauty. And that's why we say that the structures are not given. They emerge out of your intention.
There's one more question.
Yes, thank you. It was really interesting. I think also to her point, I think it's a lot about the perception of reality, what we see as reality, because these things in the internet, they are both real and not real. And there is no objective reality. And we deal with a lot of things today that we take as real existing entities, but they are not there just real because we collectively, or most of us, think that they are real. Like Google, for example, it's not just a search engine. It's like in the ancient times when the people believed in the gods, and they collectively believed in twice and other things, it becomes also, it's not just a story anymore, it's reality, because the people believe in this. They build temples and burn things for them. This, effect, so it has a the things that the problem with this, development in the last 20 years is that our brains develop for a certain amount of time, and this came so fast and created a new reality that we didn't have the time to get used to it. So, yeah.
Comment, maybe keep it short and then we'll start. You wanna? I think it deserves an answer.
Oh, cool.
But this was more like a comment, or you didn't...
There was not a question, yeah.
Can I pass it on? There's one more question?
Yes.
Okay.
So I want to make it clear. So how did I see this? Is like, if you're not sitting at the table with, if you don't have good friends at the table, you don't have enough money to pay the bill. Is that right?
I mean, it depends on what you call good friends, but you could also decide to set up a dinner where you invite friends that you are not really friends with, just for the sake of knowing where each one wants to sit at the table. Yeah, exactly. Just in terms of knowing which is your position in regards to them. Or you can invite people that you don't know. But the beauty is that over time, when you start playing with these articulations, then you start knowing how to project yourself, and you start articulating your own brand. And this is where you start knowing which your friends are and which are not, and so on. But I think you should keep in mind that your identity is not fixed. You have the ability to articulate it over and over, and or even preserve this multiplicity of phases. And this is one of the challenges, but also the promises of the digital. Yeah.
And I would just like to add on this comment with Google. So I think it's very, very interesting that by playing these kind of games, you can actually invert the story. So instead of having these big guys making profiles of you, you say, okay, now I will play the game, but in a way that I make profiles of them, or that I articulate myself with their kind of material in my own terms. So I think this is a very, very interesting, because then you become like a person who is really acting in the public space of the digital, but not as someone who has nothing to say, but you're saying, okay, you're profiling me, I'm profiling you in a way. So we play a different game, and then it gets more complicated for them, and you become a person. I think this is a very interesting moment. And to see that this is actually possible to do as a person with this small computer, I think this is fantastic.
So if you haven't seen the playwright, the new movie, no? It's very interesting exactly with regard to this. Of course, this is not my friends, what does that mean? No? And then you model, so you say, this is my place, I place. You hear, that doesn't mean that they agreed to be sitting there. And here in public space. And Blade Runner beautifully plays the piano of this kind of music. So that's really, we talked last time about the singularity university, and I told you about this fantasy that there is a transhumanism and the new human coming through the density of internet connections and so on. This idea of a person has a completely different story. No? It says, no, it's not a new human which will be without the body and in the channels of communication. It's the personalities that a lot of people share interest in. They acquire a certain kind of an autonomy. And these stories are characterizing our time. That's almost all we can say about them. No? So the question is, how do we find a way to relate to them without just being scared?